Okay, so usually I don't do this, right? Because, okay, so usually when I make these episode reviews, I go into them with the expectation that you have also already seen the episode and you kind of want to see someone discuss what they liked and didn't like about the episode and kind of discuss all that sort of thing so that you know, that's kind of the appeal of my reviews. It's not actually like a should I watch this episode or not? Is it good enough to watch type thing? Because that's not the point of an episode review, in my opinion, because if you've already seen the first 2 episodes, then you could probably decide for yourself whether or not the third one is worth watching. So, yeah. And so usually I go into this with the expectation you've seen the episode, and I talk about the events of the episode, and the spoiler warning is implied. This time, I don't feel right not giving the spoiler warning up front. There's a thing that happens in this episode, and I'm gonna talk about it, and it came out of absolutely nowhere for me, and it looks like from, you know, how things panned out, it's supposed to be a pretty big, like, out-of-nowhere moment. And so I don't want to tell you what it is, unless you already know what it is. So, spoiler warning, go watch the episode, it's literally, like, freely viewable on YouTube, and then come back here, okay? Alright, cool. That's the spoiler warning out of the way. What is the spoiler? For the people who kept around anyway, you'll have to sit through the rest of the video to find out, because we'll get to that later. First, we're going to be starting off with the general non-spoilery things. Yeah, okay, let's talk about it. Episode 3 of Cardfight Vanguard overdress. So, a quick topic I want to kind of talk about in regards to this episode, and the way that's, like, formatted and all that other stuff, because this is going to be a pretty controversial one. Not because of the big twist, actually. I think the big twist people will like overall, and we'll talk about that in a sec. But instead, well, the handling of the card fights, again. We're still doing this. We're still arguing about whether or not the card fights are too fast. And this is the first episode where I will say, I do agree I would have liked these card fights to have been much longer. I think this episode should have been a 2-parter. I think giving things extra time to breathe would have worked a lot more. And that's the thing, I love the series so far, but I'm not afraid to call it out on things that I would have done differently. Now the thing is, I've seen people get, like, angry over this. Like, not just, oh, I think the show could have done this better. I've seen people get, like, legitimately upset. Or at least, you know, and maybe those people are playing it up for a joke. And if you're playing it up for a joke, then feel free to continue doing so. But if you're legitimately getting angry over the show, then please don't. Because we're going to talk about the card fight thing again. Oh my god. I joked last episode that we're going to be talking about the card fight thing in every episode. And we're going to be doing it again. Because this episode has 2 card fights. And both of them are very fast. And again, my problem with overdress hasn't been that the card fights are fast, because the first 2 episodes did a really good job of showing card fights very quickly, but still, like, showing enough that you can follow along super easily and everything. And I could still follow along, but I did have a couple of moments where I was like, alright, no, wait, what are we doing here? You know, I would have liked the card fights to be a bit more substantial here. Now again, I don't need a full card fight that's, like, takes up the entire length of the episode. That's not what I'm asking for. I'm just saying, giving these 2 card fights, like, a little bit more breathing room to, like, fully set them up and everything. I don't think it was god-awful bad, you know? I don't think it was, like, enough to make me throw a fit or a temper tantrum or anything. I just think I would have personally preferred the card fights to be a little bit longer each. Again, what I would have done is I would have made this a 2-parter, but I can understand why they didn't. At the end of the day, overdress, we're 3 episodes in now, so overdress knows what kind of show it's trying to be. And so I'm hoping that from now on, the complaints that I want to see an entire, like, 20-minute long car fight from beginning to end with absolutely nothing cut out, like, I'm hoping those complaints will, like, start to kind of fade away now that we've been 3 episodes in, because you can certainly critique a show for what it is, but I'm not as big a fan of critiquing a show for what it isn't, if you know what I mean. Because overdress is very clearly trying to be a more character-focused series, and if you're just here for the card fights, that's fair. But now that we're 3 episodes in, we now fully know that, like, okay, this is the course we're taking for the rest of this overdress anime, right? Like, it would be, if anything, a bit more jarring and weird if they were to suddenly start, like having extended card fights now. It would be weird with the pacing. And that's the thing. With the other 2 episodes, I felt like the shorter card fights kind of helped the pacing. We managed to kind of get a really good balance of good card fights, but also really good character building stuff. And this episode did a pretty good job of that too. But I do think it was a little too quick, you know? I would have liked a little bit more in regards to the card fight. But again, if this is the first of the 3 card fights to kind of bother me in that regard, I think that's not too big a problem, but I guess we'll see. And that's another thing I wanted to touch on, is the idea that, well, these are just episode reviews. Episodes of a show are only very thin slices of that show, and so to make very grandiose, big statements about the quality of a show based on one thing that it does in one episode, well, it just isn't a very smart idea, right? We'll get a bigger, and I admit that as someone who makes these episode reviews, like, ideally, the more time passes and the more episodes of this show air, the more outdated these episode reviews will get, because a lot of the things I'm praising or complaining about will be addressed or changed in future episodes. Maybe I'll make a prediction about a character that doesn't end up being true, right? And so whenever I talk about the show, I'm talking about it from the point of view of, well, we haven't seen the entire show yet, so these are just my current opinions right now, but I'm willing to admit that those opinions are absolutely going to change. I'm not someone who just stubbornly doubles down on my opinion even when shown contrary evidence. In fact, we saw this in action because, well, very embarrassingly, I got upset when overdress was initially announced. I thought it was a bit too different. And I think that's what a lot of anime viewers are doing right now too. Like, they're seeing how different it is and they think it's ruined forever. But the thing with Vanguard that's so beautiful is the change is a thing. There are different eras and generations. It's very cyclical. In that, I didn't like the reboot era, and I will complain about that a lot. I take every chance I can to take pot shots at the reboot. But the thing is, yeah, I didn't like the reboot, but guess what? The reboot isn't here anymore. Instead, we have overdress, and the anime's gone in a different direction. And that's another thing I want to really, hammer home. One of the reasons I really like overdress so much is specifically that it's refreshing and new. See, the thing with a show is that it is made in a context. This is part of a larger franchise. And so because of that, well, there is context and meaning to it, right? Like, you can try to judge the show on its own with absolutely zero external factors, but I think one of the things that makes overdress specifically so interesting as an anime is the unique circumstance it's in. It's a follow-up from the reboot, you know, and it's by Clamp and Kinema Citrus, which, by the way, that's another thing I want to mention. I never want to see people say that Clamp animated the show ever again. I keep seeing people make that mistake, and you know what? As a mistake, it's an okay mistake, but Clamp do the designs. I'm sure they helped out with story beats and stuff and everything too, but first and foremost, Clamp are a group of manga artists and character designers. They do not animate. The show is animated by Kinema Citrus. And I'm going to get back to my original point in a sec, don't worry. But it kind of annoys me when this show gets praised so heavily for its animation, and the animation is outstanding, it's jaw-dropping, but then to see people incorrectly credit the wrong person for that. Imagine being an animator for Kinema Citrus who works their asses off, hours and hours a day, trying to get the action scenes perfect, and then see someone online go, "Thanks, Clamp," when you're not Clamp. That's just a small thing that bothers me, you know. Again, I can understand if people would make that mistake, but Clamp, yes, Clamp are working on overdress, but they're not the animators. So, yeah. Maybe I'll make a video in future about the staff behind overdress, because there's a lot of different people working on it, and a lot of them are contributing lots of different things, so that might be its own video at a later date. So, yeah. Overdress is really interesting in its context because it's such a break from tradition, and that's the thing that I wanted to say was interesting. The fact that it's interesting. Again, not to bash the reboot too much, lest I become the thing I try to destroy. But the thing is, the reboot, the biggest thing I didn't like about the reboot, right? I mean, obviously the execution wasn't all that great in my opinion, but I also just didn't like that it felt like it was playing things too safe, both in regards to the anime and the card game. Whenever it took any kind of big risks or chances, they were still calculated ones that felt like a formula, like, oh, but the Shin'emon arc was weird and out there, but was giving a backstory arc to one of the most popular, or at least fan favorite characters in the series really that much of a risky move? Probably not. You know, and hey, even if it is too risky, we'll just throw big boob anime lady in there to distract the people who don't like it when we take creative risks. You know, like, the reboot, nothing excited me really. There were like a couple of bursts here and there where you saw the creativity show through, but it was very, very few and very far between. And so I feel like when people get angry at overdress, it's because it's doing something new, whereas when people get angry at the reboot, it's because it's stuck in its old tradition. And that's the thing I wanted to mention, is I would rather a show be bad because it's doing something new and failing, rather than see something fail because it's too afraid of taking risks. Now, of course, you can have whatever opinion you want of each of the different series, and so can I. I'm not even implying, like, something's good or something's bad, right? Like, I like overdress, I don't like the reboot, and I really like both G and the original. But you don't have to agree with me on that regard. But the thing I want you to understand, yes, you watching, I suddenly broke the fourth wall there, is that I would rather a series try something new. And the cool thing with the cyclical nature of Vanguard is there's probably gonna be another anime after overdress, right? Same thing with the reboot. Like, right now, if this is a series you don't like, it might feel like the end of the world, you know? It might feel like ruined forever. In fact, there's a really cool, like, Wikipedia article I was looking at earlier because I sent it to a friend of mine on Twitter, where basically it's on the Transformers wiki of all things, but it sums up a mindset. Basically the idea that a absolutely massive franchise can be quote-unquote ruined forever by such a small change. But the thing is, these franchises like Vanguard, like Yu-Gi-Oh!, like these other kind of things, like Pokemon, is that because they have this like generational sort of format to the way the anime is handled, where if you don't like an anime, just sit and wait, and then they'll release a new one and you might like that one. And that's what happened with me at the reboot, right? I mean, I was very loud and I bitched and complained about it a lot. But here we are, we're in overdress, and I like this a lot more. And that was a very long rant. But I hope you understand what I'm getting at here. And again, most importantly, I hope that any anger I see from people is like joke comedy anger. Like, oh, it's funny to shit on something. I can understand that. I can empathize with that. I can definitely understand, like, shitting on a piece of media as a joke. But the people who are like, oh, I'm like the biggest Vanguard fan, I love it so much, I watched all of the animes, I play the card game all the time, but it's ruined forever, man. The fact that they skipped a couple of card fights in overdress, it's ruined forever now. There's no coming back from this. I'm out. And you may think I'm over exaggerating, but no, I have actually seen someone go through that spiel today. Not to call them out or anything. If you're watching the video, no hard feelings. And, you know, I don't want to attack you personally. I just thought it was a funny example. Now to talk about the actual episode, I guess. 14 minutes in. Yeah, we're doing this. I really like the episode, because one of the things I really like about Cardfight Vanguard overdress, the anime, is that it's very character-focused first and foremost. Each episode seems to focus on the characters in a really cool way. Again, I need to repeat from earlier, I do think this is the weakest of the three for the reasons we've already been through, but I do think the character stuff here was pretty good. Funnily enough, I do think the weed pulling scene was like maybe a little out of nowhere and drawn out, but it definitely did add quite a bit to the characters. Yeah, so I did still like that stuff. It did foreshadow, if I can find, yeah, this bit. It did foreshadow something that's in the synopsis of the show. Seriously, if you go and check the official synopsis of the series, they mention something that I have intentionally not mentioned yet because of the fact that the anime hadn't. And that's the idea that Yuyu can sense people's feelings, and they finally foreshadow it here. Because, yeah, in the official synopsis, this entire time, it said that Yuyu can sense people's feelings, and this episode with the broken clock finally foreshadowed that in some way. By having Yuyu help fix the clock by finding a missing piece and sensing its feelings. And I'm very interested to see what they do with that. I have theories for sure, but I think it's one of those ideas where it's so cool that anything they do could be interesting, right? As long as it doesn't devolve into straight up mind reading. Like, I hope he can sense people's feelings, which is what he can do, but no more than that. The moment he starts like reading people's mind and going, I know what you have in your hand during a card fight, that probably wouldn't be very good. But the idea of sensing someone's feelings, though, like knowing that something's on someone's mind and something's troubling them, that's a cool idea, and I'm looking forward to see what they do with it. Again, I don't have much else to say about that aspect right yet, because we did only get like a line or two of foreshadowing towards it, but I thought that stuff was neat. The stuff with the card shop was pretty cool. I will say I've seen like vlogs, like Japanese vlogs of people going to a Japanese card shop, and this is by far the most accurate Japanese card shop they've done in basically any card game anime. This one looked exactly like the card shops I've seen in like Japanese vlogs and stuff. So obviously I'm not Japanese, so I could be wrong about that. But at least from my experiences of seeing like vlogs and stuff, this looked pretty damn accurate. Not that that makes the episode significantly better or worse, I just think it's a cool little detail to point out. And that's the other thing too, is there's so much attention to detail with how it's being handled, that I really like that stuff. It shows that the staff working on it really care, and knowing that the staff working on it care adds a lot. You know, it makes me feel easy and comfortable, because it means that when they make a mistake, it's because they're genuinely trying but just kind of messed up, rather than it being like malicious and just kick the anime out the doors before it's even done and ready, and just, you know rush it. That kind of stuff. Like, it makes it feel more genuine and human, and I really like that. Obviously, that could just be me sucking up, but you know, I used this screenshot because I just thought the visual imagery of having the Bermuda Triangle poster behind Danji like that was really funny. I don't have anything else to say about that. I will mention one really weird and out of nowhere scene is the scene where Yuyu's in the shower. I don't really have anything to say about it. I just think it's weird and out of nowhere. Obviously, it's fan service. I get that. But to be fair, I did complain about the fan service in the Shinemon arc when it happened with Asuka. So in order to be consistent here, I also need to bring it up here. Okay, cool. No one can complain that I'm a hypocrite now, because I was even and fair. So the card fights, yeah. I really like the joke where they made the soul for Barrow Magnus look so huge. It's like bigger than his deck. It's just a funny little visual gag, because obviously his soul isn't actually that huge. It's like bigger than his deck. I just thought that was really funny. One other thing, I don't know if I have a screenshot that shows it, but Yuyu does have the blackout sleeves now, which I think is a fun little, detail, basically, you know, like the idea that at some point during this episode when he was training with the others, he earned his blackout sleeves, because obviously in the previous episode he didn't have them, but now he does. So the idea that he's like accepted and part of the team now and everything, I really like that. It's a little detail. Yeah, basically. Visual storytelling. I like how much they tell us about these characters without actually, like, telling us, just showing us. It's obviously, like, one of the most basic rules of storytelling, to show us things rather than tell us about things, but I really like it nonetheless. I like the background characters. So here in this screenshot, these background characters are consistent. That's crazy and kind of mind-blowing to me, because this character here specifically, I mean, I do recognize most of these, but this background, it's like they actually designed the other background members of Blackout, which is crazy. Like, obviously that makes sense, obviously they designed them, but the idea that it is a consistent crowd of people and it's always the same people each time is really crazy to me. I was not expecting that. I was expecting it to just be generic background characters that we would never remember them, I guess. That's my point, is probably what it is. It's the fact that I remember these background characters. I see them and I go, oh, I've seen them before. That's really cool. I really like that. I like that we had 2 settings for the card fights. That was really nice. Like, so we revisited two of the different places that we've card fighted before in previous episodes. And I like that that seems to be a consistent thing now, that the big stage that they're at in this screenshot is the one where we get the cool animation, basically. That's like the big one. I guess maybe the idea of being on a stage like this in front of an audience helps aid the character's imagination. And for the people who were like, oh, you know what, I really liked it when the Vanguard anime did the thing where the characters actually imagined themselves on Cray. Well, they acknowledged that this episode. Obviously, they did acknowledge it in the first episode too, but they just didn't say it, they just showed it. This time they actually, like, openly mention, like, that they are imagining themselves. So there you go, they're doing it. I like the visual for the overtrigger. In fact, I was waiting for the overtrigger ever since episode 1. I was like, alright, when are we seeing the first overtrigger? And we indeed saw it. So that was really cool. I love the way they visualized it. I mean, do I even need to talk about the animation stuff? You know the animation stuff's good. Having Yuyu ride Nirvana like that is really neat. And okay, let's talk about the actual thing, the spoiler. I was gonna see, we're really late in, and so I was considering making it its own separate video, but then that makes the spoiler warning from earlier on redundant, so I guess we'll touch it now. So the big twist that this episode is leading up towards, and it comes out of nowhere, is the idea that Danji gives up on card fighting. He's like, alright, cool, I had a card fight with Yuyu, I beat Yuyu, I got my 21st win in a row, I give up. And I think there's a lot to go into there. First of all, it really did come out of nowhere for me. Obviously, there's probably a lot of foreshadowing if you go back and rewatch the episodes. There's probably signs. The fact that he's focusing so much on his job and even brings Yuyu to his job is probably foreshadowing. Can I just say, I love this twist. I think this twist is the single best thing the overdress anime has done yet. This twist is so good because we are now revealing finally what the plot of the series is. Because up until this point, we've just basically been introducing characters, showing you getting into the card game and everything, but now we know what the series is actually about. At least, again, bear in mind I mentioned that we're only reviewing an episode at a time, so I could be wrong here, of course. But it seems to be a series, well, about Yuyu kind of taking the place of the future, basically. Like, he's taking over Danji's role. And tell me if this sounds familiar to you. So, you've got Danji, who's a really respected, really revered card fighter. Everyone loves him, he always wins, etc, etc. He's really kind. Suddenly, out of nowhere, he just kind of calls it quits. He's like, alright, it's time, I should go. And now it's Yuyu's turn, the new fresh face, the one who's kind of nervous, the one who shows a lot of potential, the one who is definitely trying his hardest, has to take over, but he's not sure if he's ready to. Now, whatever you answered with how that sounded familiar, I like whatever answer you gave, but you're wrong, because the real thing that this is a visual metaphor is overdress. Danji represents the card game up until this point. And he calls it quits. And the new overdress format, it shows potential. People are kind of, there's some aspects people are divided on, like the overtriggers and stuff. But overall, it looks really fun and exciting. But it's also really nervous and doesn't know if it can take over or not. But the really important thing to know and to bear in mind is that, well, it's important to brace change in the future. You can't always just stay with the same thing forever. And so, whether Yuyu's ready or not, he needs to take Danji's place. Do you get what I'm getting at here? And I think that's what the episode's about overall, because even though we only get this revelation like right at the end, it's literally the last thing that happens before the credits roll, it does tie into everything else in the episode. Because before this episode, card fighting was about fun. Episode 2, strictly about friends having fun with each other, right? Episode 3 even had stakes. You had this champion of Noto with 100 wins in a row. I totally didn't just read that off my notes. And now Yuyu has to learn. You see that montage of him with like the notebook and everything, trying to write down as much notes as he can, cramming information in a week. And It's about the difference between taking things competitively and just taking things for fun. And there's a lot of nuance there because it never says the competitive angle is bad. In fact, Yuyu is shown to enjoy himself a lot, and he does win. And Danji even says that he admires Yuyu's fighting spirit and the fact that he does take it so seriously. But I also think the idea that Danji having so much pressure on him, the idea that people actively keep count of what his win ratio is, that shows how much stress he's under. It's fun stress, but it's stress all the same. And he's growing up, and he needs to worry about his job and everything. And so he gives up. Where will they go with this next? In the next episode? Who knows? Is the series going to be about Yuyu convincing Danji to continue card fighting? Or is it really going to be about Yuyu taking Danji's place? Is Danji going to be the mentor character from now on? Are we never going to see him card fight again? Are we going to see a new character jump in and start using the Bruce deck? Who knows? And by the way, if we genuinely are never going to see the Violence Bruce deck ever again in this anime, then holy shit, that's like, as a card game anime, that's massive. To just stop advertising that deck entirely, like, Jesus Christ. And the cool thing is they intentionally made Danji a likable character. They tried their hardest to make him as likable as possible. And so taking him away, it gets a reaction from the audience 3 episodes in. If you are watching episode 3 and that moment where Danji says that he's giving up happened and you are genuinely like shocked and surprised and you felt like emotion watching that, like I did, then you have to admit the series is good. Haha, I win. And that's going to be where I end it for now because this video is now officially longer than the episode I'm reviewing, and things get a bit pretentious when your review is longer than the thing you're actually reviewing. So I'm going to stop there for now. I do like the subject matter with Danji and potentially giving up the card fight, so we'll probably pick this up at some point, whether that's in its own standalone video or whether that's in like the episode 4 review or whatever. We'll just have to wait and see basically. But I really liked the episode. It was my least favorite of the 3, for sure, but I thought it was really solid. I had a lot of fun watching it, and that's all I have to really say. So give your opinions in the comments. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And remember, for every statement, there's an asterisk. See ya.